Have you ever seen something as small as a mailbox become a symbol of dignity? Defiance and justice? This isn't just about metal and wood. This is about a man who was pushed too far, and how he finally pushed back in a way no one expected. This is James's story, and once you hear it, you'll never look at a mailbox the same way again. James lived on a quiet ranch at the far edge of town, the kind of place where mornings were filled with the sound of roosters and evenings with the distant bark of coyotes. His land stretched wide with fences he'd built with his own hands, and a weathered barn that smelled of hay and hard work. He wasn't rich, he wasn't a man of power, and he never tried to make himself important. He believed in honest labor, quiet living, and the simple dignity of owning a patch of earth where he could breathe free. Most evenings, James would sit on his porch with a glass of iced tea, rocking gently in an old wooden chair, watching the sun melt into shades of orange and red. To him, that peace was everything. But peace has a way of attracting trouble, and trouble doesn't always come in loud ways. For James, it came in the form of something small, his mailbox. The first time it happened, James didn't think much of it. A police cruiser driving too fast down the country road clipped his mailbox. The metal box bent, the wooden post cracked, and letters were scattered across the dirt. James picked up the pieces, hammered the post straight again, and told himself, accidents happen. But then it happened again and again. He replaced the mailbox once, twice, 3 times. Every time the same thing. Smashed, broken, tossed into the ditch. Sometimes it was bent so badly it looked like a soda can flattened under a boot. At first, James thought maybe it was bad luck, or maybe the officers were just careless. But after the 5th time, he knew better. He started paying attention. The patrol cars weren't swerving away from the mailbox. They were swerving toward it. Sometimes they slowed down just before impact, almost as if aiming. Each time, James felt a deeper sting. Not just in his wallet, not just in the wasted hours fixing what shouldn't have been broken, but in his chest. Because this wasn't about the mailbox anymore. It was about respect, or rather the lack of it. The mailbox became a message that said, "We can do what we want and you can't stop us." James didn't shout. He didn't storm down to the police station. He tried to be patient, but each time he stepped outside and found his mailbox lying in the dirt, bent and broken again, that patience wore thinner and thinner. The neighbors noticed too. Mrs. Kelly, who lived half a mile down the road, saw him dragging the twisted post out of the ditch one afternoon. She shook her head. "James," she said, "you can't fight them. Just let it go. It isn't worth the trouble." Another neighbor, Mark, had his own advice. "You stand up to them," he muttered, "and they'll just make things worse. Best to stay quiet." But James wasn't a man who liked conflict, and yet he wasn't a man who could ignore injustice either. Every smashed mailbox chipped away not only at the wood and metal, but at his pride, his dignity, his sense of belonging on the very land he'd worked his whole life to maintain. One evening, after replacing yet another mailbox, James sat on his porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. His shoulders ached, his hands were rough from digging and hammering, but his mind was sharper than ever. He whispered into the cooling air, "If I keep replacing it, they'll keep breaking it. If I stay quiet, they'll think I'll always stay quiet. No, it ends here." And with that, James began to plan. The very next day, he disappeared into his shed. The sound of drills and hammers filled the air. To passing neighbors, it looked like he was repairing tools, maybe working on a tractor. But James wasn't fixing farm equipment. He was building a message. He started with a simple mailbox. Nothing fancy, just the same kind most folks had along the country roads. But inside, James reinforced it with thick steel plates. He welded each piece until sparks danced like fireflies in the dark shed. He lined the inside with bolts and bracing, every inch designed to withstand not just a bump, but a full collision. The box looked normal, but it weighed more than 100 pounds. Then came the post. He didn't use wood this time. He didn't even use hollow steel. He dug a hole deeper than anyone would expect, filled it with concrete, and planted a solid iron beam straight into the earth. He anchored it so firmly it became part of the ground itself. To anyone driving by, it looked like just another rural mailbox. But beneath the surface, it was a fortress. James stood back, sweat dripping from his brow, and studied his work. He wasn't grinning with vengeance. He wasn't plotting revenge. He was calm. What he built wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about protecting what was his, about sending a message back. A message that said, "You don't get to bully me anymore." Days passed. The mailbox stood tall and untouched. Police cruisers drove by, and James held his breath. Nothing happened. He almost thought maybe they'd gotten bored. Maybe they'd found another target. But then came the night he'd been waiting for. It was late. The kind of night when the stars were so bright, you could almost hear the silence between them. James was inside when he heard it. The familiar crunch of gravel under tires, followed by the sudden roar of an engine. His chest tightened. He knew. Then came the crash. The sound was louder than he'd expected. A sharp metallic thud, followed by the screech of twisting metal and the hiss of steam. James walked calmly out to his porch, his boots heavy on the wooden steps. And there it was. A police cruiser sat crooked in the ditch, its front bumper mangled, the hood bent upward like an open jaw. Steam poured out, headlights flickering weakly. And in front of it, standing perfectly tall and untouched, was James's mailbox. Not a dent. Not even a scratch. The officer stumbled out of the car, dazed, staring at the mailbox with disbelief. His face was red, not from injury, but from embarrassment. He grabbed his radio with shaking hands. "Dispatch," he muttered. I need a tow. Hit something. Vehicle's disabled." James leaned against the porch railing, arms folded across his chest. He didn't laugh. He didn't shout. He didn't need to say a word. The mailbox said it all. The tow truck arrived, chains clanking in the still night air as they hauled the broken cruiser away. The mailbox remained, proud and immovable, like a sentry guarding James's dignity. The story spread quickly through town. Neighbors who had once told James to stay quiet now came to shake his hand. Mark grinned and said, "James, you actually did it. You beat them at their own game." James only shook his head. "No," he said calmly. "I didn't beat them. I just stopped letting them beat me." From that night on, no one touched his mailbox again. It became more than a place for letters. It became a symbol. A reminder that sometimes the quietest resistance can be the strongest. And James's story carried a lesson that reached beyond his ranch. Standing up for yourself doesn't always mean shouting the loudest or throwing the hardest punch. Sometimes it means building something so solid, so unshakable that no one can break it, no matter how hard they try. Injustice, disrespect, bullying, they come in many forms. But dignity comes when you refuse to be broken, when you refuse to bow, when you quietly stand your ground until the world understands you are not so easily moved. So ask yourself, what's the mailbox in your life? What's the thing people keep knocking down? The thing that makes you feel powerless? Maybe it's your confidence. Maybe it's your dreams. Maybe it's your boundaries. Whatever it is, make it unshakable. Reinforce it. Protect it. Stand firm the way James did. And if James's story inspired you, share it with someone who needs that reminder. Because sometimes the smallest stand can change the biggest battles.